state representatives to tonight's McKinney Tea Party Town Hall. We have Representative Scott Sanford from District 7. Representative Scott Turner from District 33. Representative David Simpson from District 7. Representative Van Taylor from District 66. We also have a place for Representative Pat Fallon from District 106. And Representative Jeff Leach from District 67. And finally, Representative Giovanni Capriglione from District 98. Is your opportunity to ask in-depth questions regarding these candidates and representatives, plans, principles, and methodology to achieve success in the 8th session. Each candidate is going to have 2 minutes of introduction, and the remainder of the time, the audience will be able to ask concise questions, allowing the candidates to give their positions so that you will be better equipped to decide whether or not they should go back to Austin 2014. There are some rules. Questions will be addressed to one candidate. Response times will be limited. And the questions will rotate between the candidates. A moderator will enforce the time limits, and another moderator will be controlling the microphones for questions. Tonight's moderators will be Mr. Chuck Molyneux and Mr. Dennis Sharp. Mr. Molyneux.
Weren't the kids great? They were great on Austin. They're part of North Texas Citizens Lobby, an outstanding group that travels to Austin every single week. This evening we will ask if you are a conservative, and if so, what kind? Do you compromise or do you hold to your campaign promises, your oath of office, your principles, and to the Constitution of the United States of America? We may use specific bills as a point of reference. We're very grateful for your service, your diligence, and your willingness to actually participate in an open town hall meeting. We want to better understand exactly where you stand, what you'll do for the state of Texas, and its citizens. Gentlemen, I would ask that you take no more than 2 minutes, and starting with Giovanni, would you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, if you're going to run again, and cut it off.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for inviting me here. My name is Giovanni. I don't know
We can't hear.
So I represent the northeasternmost part of Kaaren County. That's just west of DFW, south of Chicago, Grapevine, Keller area. And before I was elected, I was a Tea Party activist. I was involved in a lot of the Tea Parties in my area on the board. I was on the steering committee. And I saw the sign when I walked in here about the local tax election. So before I became elected, I've been involved in 2 grassroots campaigns, 2 efforts to oppose tax elections in my district. We won both of those, and we ended up saving the residents of my district. We ended up saving the residents of my district in those tax elections nearly $19 million a year. So I was very excited to be part of the Tea Party and all those activities. I was also very happy to be part of the legislature. But more importantly, to be with these fellows right here. One of the things you realize really quickly is that only about 20% of what you do down in Austin is voting. The rest of the time you're doing is working together to prepare for the votes. A lot of teamwork comes involved in order to be able to push what we want to get done. And I was thinking about this when I came here, about folks that are here, whether it was, for instance, Jeff Leach talking about making sure that we didn't have Medicaid expansion in Texas under Obama. It was Van Taylor who stood up he's the one, in my opinion, he's the one that stood up when no one was paying attention to stop driver's permits for immigrants. Scott Sanford, who is the one that from now on will be able to look really closely at the lottery commission to make sure that we're following the rules and that we judge it every year in every session. And Scott Turner, he's passionate speaker, incredible speaker, but every time he spoke, a lot of times when we talk about was education and how what's been lost in these conversations is what the focus is, and that the focus is educating the child. And then we're talking about background, so I'll stop at that. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you to all of our sponsors for hosting this evening, and welcome to all of you to House District 67, which I proudly represent in the Texas House. And I am proudly running for re-election. We're going to have trouble with this microphone. Is that okay? Can y'all hear it? Yeah. Okay. I am proudly running for re-election to the Texas House of Representatives because while we had a very good session, we have a lot more work to do. And you're seeing across the United States right now what we've seen in Texas for so long, and that's the grassroots across America are waking up to a difference between elected officials and public servants who are committed to people and people who are now just a part of the political process. Elected officials who say the right things during campaign season and then go to either Washington, D.C. or to Austin or even locally on the city council and do something completely different. And when I ran for election last year to the Texas House, I committed to my constituents when I was asking for their vote, when I was knocking on doors and working phone banks and working town halls and events like this, I committed that I wasn't just going to go down and vote the right way, but that I was going to roll up my sleeves and go to work and fight for the people. That I was going to fight for less taxes and limited government. That I was going to fight for more transparency, more accountability in our government. That I was going to fight everything I had to protect innocent life. That we were going to fight for education reform. That we were going to fight for a budget that was honest and transparent and that spent money where we needed to spend money. Some of these things we got done and some of the things we didn't. But I can tell you with absolute certainty this evening that I did everything that I said I was going to do. The promises that I made to my constituents were fulfilled. We had, as I said, a very good session. We passed the most radical pro-life legislation in the United States that's been passed in a very long time, thanks to our good friend Giovanni. We cut taxes. We created more accountability and transparency in government. We, those of us sitting here tonight, voted against a budget that was bloated, that had wasteful spending, that didn't cut enough taxes, and these are promises that we kept to you. And so I'm proud to run for re-election tonight, and would ask for your continued support because we need to not just elect Republicans, and we need to not just elect people who say they're conservative during election season. We need to elect men and women across the state, from school boards to city councils to the state legislature to United States Congress to President of the United States, who know what they believe, who know why they believe it, and who knows that what they believe doesn't change when they're on the floor of the Texas House.
We use that all the time.
Wow,
that's our next call. I'm Van Taylor. I represent southwestern Collin County in the Texas legislature. It's great to be here, and I want to thank all of our sponsors who took a huge effort putting this together. Just so you know, he was in my office in Austin, I believe in May, pimping me for this. Like, hey, you got to give me a bit. I'm glad that you're all here. Power comes from the people, and I truly believe that. Government exists to protect our God-given rights and derives its just powers from the consent of the government. And you can find those words in the Declaration of Independence. And that's what I believe the Texas government is here to do, is to protect your rights, and I'm going to fight for them every step of the way. I'm a seventh generation Texan. I was born in Dallas and served on active duty in the Marine Corps. I was a precinct chairman. I was active in Collin County politics. and was successfully elected to the legislature in 2010. Over the last 2 sessions, I've been twice awarded the Taxpayer Champion Award by Texas for Fiscal Responsibility. Recently won the Courageous Conservative Award from the Texas Conservative Coalition. I'm now a candidate for the state senate, so Ken Paxton, our state senator, is running for Attorney General, and I have a campaign flyer out there, and on the back of it, and this is, talk about this being your question, your time, there's my cell phone number. So if you have questions after here, this is my cell phone number, my email address. And I just want to tell you, I handed this out about a year ago to some first graders. I hand out my cell phone, I've handed it out to thousands of people, some ask, and most of them. But, I got a phone call from one of the mothers of the first graders, and she said, "Is this Van Taylor?" I said, "Yeah, this is Van Taylor." And she said, "Is this really Van Taylor?" I said, "Yeah, it's really Van Taylor." "Are you sure it's not his answering service?" And I said, "No, it's really me. Why do you ask?" I just want to see if you really put this on your flyers. Yeah. I do put on my flyers because, again, I believe power goes to the people. I work for you, and I'm happy to take your questions here, and I'm happy to take your questions afterwards. So feel free to call me.
My name is David Simpson. I'd like to, first of all, just thank you so much for doing this. We all stand on your shoulders, and especially your prayers. And we appreciate you coming to hold us accountable, and we thank you. My home is where my wife of 28 years is. We presently reside in Longview, Texas, Northeast Texas, with our 3 of our 7 children, and I work in the timber industry, planting and cultivating pine timber. Serving my 2nd term and serve House District 7, which is comprised of Gregg and Upshur County, where Longview, Gilmer, Kilgore are. My passion is to restrain civil government to its proper limited role. Simply put, that's to punish the wrongdoer, enforce the rules among men or contracts, and then we need to get it out of the way. The way we can do that is by limiting government spending and its powers, and also by restoring individual freedom and responsibility. I came here primarily for one reason, is to thank you all for sending these men to the state legislature. I am grateful to serve with them, and I am thankful not to be so much alone on so many issues. And I want to ask you to send them back, and one to the Senate. And thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Turner. David, thank you for that. And Van and Jeff and Gio and Scott, thank you for being here. And Chuck, thank you for hosting us tonight. I simply want to say thank you to all of you for your support. Thank you for your prayers. I represent House District 33, which is a new seat, or was a new seat, that encompasses all of Brockwell County and portions of Collin County, including Frisco, Prosper, Salina, Anna, Blue Ridge, Fonesville, Josephine, and Westminster. And it has been a joy to serve every citizen in this district. I'm a guy that, I'm a local businessman. I get to preach every now and then, which is the love of my life, and a family man that was very concerned of the direction of this country and the direction of the state as far as leadership and the moral degradation that you and I saw every day. And that's what drove me to run for the Texas House. And also to see that Texas' job economy would remain strong. That educational reform would be something that's very serious, giving parents a choice to put their kids in the best school that suits them. Because there's a lot of babies out there that are stuck in underperforming schools. And that's how I made it, was education. It was my books. It wasn't just athletic talent, it was education. And also to see that the life of the unborn remained protected. And, we did a lot of those things this past session. And as was stated earlier, there were some things that we did not do. But you know, God's grace is new every morning, so we get to go back. We're working right now to improve and to set a platform and foundation that can catapult us in 84th session. And so it would be the will of the people, more importantly, the will of the Lord, that we go back and continue to work and do great work also for you, your family, for the posterity of this state, and ultimately for our country. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here this evening, and I do have a brief statement and announcement. I do believe that the future in Texas is very bright. Texans by birth, or those who got here just as quickly as they could, are unique in their desire for freedom. Freedom for themselves, freedom for their families, their businesses, their schools, and their worship. God has blessed Texas. He has given us a beautiful and rugged landscape with natural resources that Texans have worked hard to tap and develop. People and jobs continue to move to Texas as a favorable business climate has proven magnetic for investment capital. With God's blessings, it is the people of Texas that has made it strong. With an emphasis on faith, family, and personal responsibility, Texans believe that every person should be productive and charitable. However, there are clear threats to what has made Texas free and strong. Threats of higher taxation of its people, over-regulation of its businesses, teaching revisionist history in its schools, socializing its health care, and even oppression of religious believers exist even in this greatest of states. Texas must continue to lead. Texas is the hope of America and freedom lovers around the world. For the sake of this nation's future, we must ask, if not the state of Texas, then which state? If not the people of Texas, then what people? If not you and I, then whom? It is with this sense of optimism and concern that I've had the high privilege of serving the people of District 70 as their state representative this year. It is with this continued hope and watchfulness that I form my plans for the future. Therefore, with a heart full of gratitude and humility, I am pleased to announce that I will vigorously seek re-election for the Texas House of Representatives.
Wow. Very, very impressive. So, since you were so impressive, and we are so pleased with that announcement, with your permission, we'll speak on the gentleman sitting next to you, Scott Turner. Were you in the NFL?
Yes, sir.
These are easy questions, aren't they? Did you ever carry the football in the NFL?
Yes.
Did you ever fumble?
Nope.
Say what?
No, sir.
I'm glad to hear that. I really am. Are you familiar with Senate Bill 1029, having to do with transportation and toll roads, passed on May 22nd, and is now law in Texas?
Yes.
A group from North Texas Citizens Lobby was in the Capitol on May 22nd. The day this short one-page Senate bill passed in your House chamber, of which you voted in favor of it twice on the same day. When did it come, I hope I didn't get all this out of order. What was confusing about this bill, like many bills, is that it wasn't what the bill specifically said, but it was what the bill specifically didn't say. What it did specifically say, and what the MTCL tried to convey to you, was that this bill repealed these actions. Prior to converting a state highway or a segment of a state highway, a public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments from interested persons concerning the proposed conversion is conducted. The Texas Transportation Commission may only convert a state highway or a segment of a state highway if the conversion is approved by the Commissioner's Court and qualified voters. On May 22nd, you texted one of our own North Texas Citizens Lobby members and asked him to meet you outside the House chamber to discuss SB 1029 and our opposition to it before the House vote occurred that day. You still voted yea on the second and also the third reading of that bill. Myra Crownover, you're familiar with her? From Denton. Patricia Harless, of all people. Some guy named Scott Sanford. David Simpson. Jonathan Stickles. All voted nay. Yet you voted for it. Tell us why.
I will. First of all, to your explanation, there's 150 members in the House, and everybody doesn't vote the same way all the time, including us conservatives. There are times that we vote the same, probably vote the same 99% of the time, there's maybe a percent of the time that we don't vote the same. After much research, analysis, discussion with my staff, and the Tea Party came to my office, since we're being specific. And my legislative director talked to them and gave them an understanding that what the bill said in the caption was not actually what the bill did. And so our understanding of the bill was that a toll road, a road that's a state highway at the moment, going forward, could not be turned into a toll road. And any project that is underway right now, if they're being turned into a toll road, this bill did not address that. This bill addressed those that could be turned into toll roads. That was our understanding. And that's why I voted for the bill. Because I am for local control. I am for limited government. And that was our understanding that my legislative director, whom I trust very much and does a great job, that was our understanding he and I had. We talked to the Tea Party members beforehand about that and told them what our stance was before I took the vote. And so, unashamedly, whether or not the Tea Party agrees or whatever they think about the vote, I voted for it because that was the understanding that I had. And that was the understanding that many others had. And so, to say such and such voted no and such and such voted yes, I mean, it's all public record. But we're not going to all vote the same every time. So my understanding was such. That's why I voted the way I did.
Would you say your understanding to justify voting in favor of a one-page transportation bill that removes local oversight by the county commissioner's court and voters' approval at a ballot box? Do you vote in favor of removing oversight by the commissioner's court and of not allowing the voters to approve it in the ballot box?
Could you make that more clear?
I can.
He's asking, did you follow?
There are three things that the bill addressed.
By the way, Senator Paxton sponsored this bill.
I did not put that. Paragraph, section 228-203 addresses public hearing. It talks about prior to converting a state highway or a segment of a state highway, the commission shall conduct a public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments from interested persons concerning the proposed conversion. You voted to repeal that. 228.207, county and a voter approval. The commission may only convert a state highway or a segment of a state highway if the conversion is approved by the commissioner's court and qualified voters. Section 228.208. At the election to approve a conversion, county or municipality shall publish notice of the election at least once each week for 3 consecutive weeks and conduct elections according to the election code. You voted to repeal that. How can your constituents abstain standing with you and your staff when it comes to the researching of these bills? We came down, we came up to your office. You are extremely receptive to us when we come in. Every time we come to Austin, we're in your office, but yet you voted the wrong way as far as we were concerned on that particular bill. How do we obtain enough standing to get you to continue your research or vote not present?
Well, did you count the bills that I voted the right way according to?
We have looked at all the voting records. In fact, we looked at everybody's voting records. We're going to work this bill.
That's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Who do you rely on to research these bills before the House and also your committees you serve on? What research do you accept? Yes, sir. We got it.
Whose research do I accept?
Yes, sir.
Well, my legislative director, my chief of staff, and also a lot of guys who sit at this table, our staffs work together. And so there's a lot of research that goes on either by committee, by senior member staffs, or other outside think tanks that we all allow, we vet, we discuss. And so there's not one source of information that we use, there's several.
So you would, when these folks come down to Austin during the 84th session, you would listen to them as well.
Like I did in 83.
Hopefully more.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me just ask you one last question. This, my friend, is a town hall meeting, and now you see why they don't fund this bill. Why won't you vote no on a bill that you are not allowed enough time to research the consequences of what happens if that bill passes?
Why won't I vote no on the bill that I'm not allowed enough time?
If you're not fully researched on that bill, would you still vote in favor?
Well, I didn't say I wasn't fully researched. I'm not waffling in what I thought. We were fully researched and confident in what our research told us. Thank you.
Scott Sanford. On the other hand, you drank that whole cup in one swallow. Scott Sanford, you voted in favor of, you voted against that bill. Senate Bill 1029. And you are not the only one at this table that voted against that bill. Can you tell us why you voted against that bill?
It must have been a mistake because I normally follow Scott Turner.
They stick together, don't they? David Simpson, are you there? You are. You, sir, voted against that bill as well as Scott Turner. We appreciate that vote against that. We are very much interested in both the 9th and the 10th Amendments in the United States Constitution, both of which emphasize the rights of the people, followed by the rights of the states. And you and Scott Sanford chose to vote in favor of the 9th and 10th Amendments. Could you recall why you voted nay on Senate Bill 1029?
I'm having a hard time understanding your relationship between the 9th and 10th Amendment and that bill. I could probably tell you why I voted no. I remember, but I'll just tell you what, if I had more time to research it, we did vote on about 1,800 bills. I remember dealing with, I believe, was Larry Phillips the one carrying the house? I actually worked with him and tried to make an amendment. I believe he did make that amendment, which I thought made the bill better. But I still thought that overall the bill was not the thing to do.
Do you want to remove the Commissioner's Court and people from the moving highways, from a public highway to a toll road? Do the people have any say in that?
Well, they should have a say, and I think where possible, we should have local control. I would differ with you just a little bit on applying the 9th and 10th Amendment to municipalities and counties. And we did have a big bill dealing with that in the first session when I was there, and most were signed on to it. The counties and municipalities are sub-political sections of the state. The state is sovereign. We gave the powers to the federal government. We set the policy and limit the powers municipalities and counties. Municipalities actually can do a lot of things that counties cannot do. But that being aside, I do think a general principle is Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution does say that our free institutions and the perpetuity of the Union are dependent upon the maintenance of those, dependent upon the preservation of our local self-government. So as much self-government as we can have, the better. And in that case, unless it has to do with a huge stretch of highway, I think that the Commissioner's Board should have a say.
Thus you voted nay. You think?
I don't recall that particular reason why I would name that bill. So
I certainly don't expect you to remember every bill that passed. The problem is that these people out here have a tendency to see what's happening in the United States of America these days is a great loss of personal freedom. They see that their personal rights are being stepped on by the federal government, and they look to see a state government that tends to grow and grow and grow with every session. When one of those bills comes in and further knocks out the participation of the public, they get concerned. I appreciate your indulgence, Jeff. Thank you. Jeff Leach, how you doing today?
Great.
Did you stop by the Senate and get the Senate dining the ongoing story of years. Jeff, regarding the 9th and 10th Amendments, if Texas doesn't have a state legislature that is going to pass legislation to exercise the 9th and 10th Amendments, to push back against the tyrannicals in Washington, D.C., or a governor that will sign strong 10th Amendment bills passed in the legislature, or a state attorney that is willing to go to bat for the people against federal and foreign tyrants, then can you explain to us the difference between the Texas legislature and our current federal government?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
We perceive the federal government strongly stepping on the toes of the people of the United States of America. It seems like it's every single day that what we hear coming out of the Obama administration or the Senate, the United States Senate, is more infringements on people's rights. We look to the 9th and 10th Amendments to hold our rights. If there's no if the state legislature is not going to do it, and the federal Congress is not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Well, I believe the premise of your question is based on, it seems to me like you're implying that the Texas legislature has not done that. I believe it would have, by and large. We've got a governor that has consistently fought against the federal government. We've got a governor who has consistently fought against the federal government, an attorney general who sued the federal government 75 times. We've got a state legislature who literally every day, I think all of us could give you probably over 50 instances in which we were faced with, for instance, let's talk Medicaid expansion, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. Literally from even before session convened in January, we had even members of our own party coming to us with the Texas solution for Medicaid expansion, trying to put lipstick on pig when it's still a pig. And we had to consistently, on literally a daily basis, fight off Medicaid expansion in the Texas House. I filed an amendment on May 23rd to Senate Bill 8, which is a good Medicaid bill, which basically prohibited the expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare in the state of Texas without legislative approval. And so I think that I agree with you that we do need a strong state legislature, a House and a Senate and a governor and an attorney general that are going to consistently not only protect our rights, but that are going to be vigilant in watching out for attempted abuses of our fundamental rights and fighting back proactively against the federal government. I believe we have that. I think it's at risk because you see Obama sending his people down to Texas to try to turn Texas blue. Wendy Davis is getting all this press that she's going to run for governor, be the second coming of Ann Richards. I say bring it, because you've got people like us, and y'all are going to send us more reinforcements this session to continue fight back against the federal government.
Jeff, the person sitting to your left, who is he? Would you introduce him, please?
This is Pat Fallon, my good friend, Pat Fallon.
Pat, would you take 6 minutes or less to say hello?
As part of Frisco, why don't you probably do a better job explaining your district?
Thanks, Jeff Leach. If I get that same question, I'm just going to say what he said. That was excellent. And Chuck, can I do that in 2 minutes? Doubtful, but I'll try.
You won't be the first.
When I thought about what to say, I didn't have any prepared notes because this is one of those for me anyway, this is one of those circle the calendar dates where when I get very excited about the fact that what a privilege and an honor it is to be up here on this stage getting to talk to folks like you. These aren't some folks, 200 folks randomly picked off the streets. These are people that are here because they want to be here and they care more about this country than they do themselves. And that says a lot. So what I thought about, what I want to say is, number one, say thank you. Thank you to Chuck and everybody else that organized this event. Thank you to my colleagues up here who for 7 months proved, each and every person up here, proved that they had honesty, integrity, and courage. Because it's hard to be down there when you're away from your family and when you're away from your support structure. And to have folks here that don't care about what the special interests want, they really care about what the state can do to take the shackles of government off. I remember when we were going, me and Scott Turner and the rest of us, we were out campaigning. And I heard Scott, and every time I hear Scott speak, I want to just say, "Hey, man!" Because he is so inspired. But he's so inspired. And we would say things like, there's a battle going on in this country. And I'm not talking about the conflict in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. I'm talking about a battle for our very freedoms, for the way that we want to live our lives, for the way that we want to run our businesses. And we want to be able to worship the Almighty to the dictates of our own conscience. And after 7 months of being down in Austin, you can see that all of those things can be threatened even in Texas. And that's why the people up here will not be influenced by big special interest checks. Unfortunately, there's leadership in Austin that are, on a repeated basis. When you see legislation that makes perfect sense for the majority of Texans to never even make it to the House floor, because that's how they kill. They have things like, we'll get to this, I guess, in Q&As, but HB, I think it was 1467, that get this. If you get convicted as a state legislator of corruption due to your office, you steal campaign funds, you sell a vote, whatever, you get convicted of a felony. After you get out of prison, you still collect your pension. I mean, that's absurd. They can't let that hit the floor. If that hits the floor, it's got to be 150-0 vote. How do you vote against that? So what they do is they kill in the committee process. So it's very important, in closing, it's very important what we do here tonight, what we do here in Texas, because this isn't just affecting the 26 million Texans. Where would this country be without Texas? Please remember that over the last 5 years, Texas has created almost as many jobs, one state, as all of the other 49 states combined. That recession in 08 would have been a depression. So they're watching us. And one of my colleagues said when we first got down there, one of the freshman colleagues said, the world is run by those who show up. Thank you for doing just that. God bless you.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I was going to come at you with this lipstick on the pig thing, the water bill, SGR 1, but I think I'm going back to Pat Fallon. Pat, you walked right into this. Senator Paxton, Representative Laubenberg, and Chairman Todd Hunter, and others say that Texas sessions are only 140 days and then indicate that's good because it limits the damage that is being done to the laws and citizens of Texas. Is it possible to have a legislative session that establishes a budget, improves the quality of life, enhances personal freedom, improves quality of education, and limits government infringements? And if so, how?
Chuck, good, great question. Is it possible? Yes. How? Get more folks elected like the people to the right and the left of me. There are a lot of races, we're very lucky and fortunate because we have population density in Dallas-Fort Worth, that each state House district is only 170,000 people. So if you're happy with your state representative, and particularly if they don't get a challenge, you can still have a say in the process, because all of us up here get one voter. And there are other races in this area that have folks that profess to be, well, like one person I can think of, they campaign like Reagan, they vote like Pelosi. And that's what we have to be vigilant about, and that's what we have to watch for, and that's why we have to pay attention. We have a lot of activists in this room, and you all do that. And we need to spread the word, and social media gives us an amazing outlet to do that now with Facebook and blast emails and things. Yeah, it is possible, but you need Ken Paxton as your Attorney General. You need great folks up here, like Van Taylor in the House and now hopefully in the Senate. And these people all appear to get reelected and get new people down there. Because one of the things that Jody would say and Ken would say to all of us, and actually Van said too, was your class, there's 43 of you, there's 29 Republicans, there's about, of those 29, probably 18, 19 solid conservatives. It's refreshing to have the reinforcements, but we were not quite there to be more of it. And in the 84th legislature, we need more rookies that will buck the system, that will think for themselves, that won't just do what leadership wants them to do to get along and go along to get the big fat lobbyist check.
We'll step up if you'll tell us now that you'll run for Speaker of the House.
I'm going to vote for the most conservative candidate in this one. Dennis, a lot of them up here, but I can see myself voting.
Dennis, would you take the microphone in the same place? I am going to ask that we get the audience involved in these questions. I would like to offer the opportunity to the kids from Joshua's generation to ask the first question. Duncan, is there any individual in particular that would like to go first? They are doing amongst each other. Duncan, would you go to the microphone, please? For those of you who would like to ask questions of the gentleman on the platform, please get in line behind Duncan and Dennis.
And the first question is from Duncan and Mr. Van Taylor.
Representative Taylor, I understand that you're considering possibly stepping into the Senate position that Ken Paxton may be leaving vacant. And I'd like to ask why you plan on doing so, and if you did, who you would endorse to take your House position.
Okay. So I announced on the 2nd of August that I was running for Ken Paxton's Senate. And I'm proud that right out of the gate, every legislator who represents even a small portion of Senate District 8 came out and endorsed me with most of the people up here. And that is, as I've spoken to elected people around Austin, around the state, that's never happened before. That's unheard of. And to have the conservatives come together and say, look, there's one person we want to be in the state Senate. I'm truly honored and humbled by that, the trust that I've been given. And consequently have received every major conservative endorsement for Texas Right to Life, Empower Texans, the Texas Tea Party. Very proud of all of that. At the end of the day, I'm going to go work for the people that sent me there. I'm going to give them my cell phone number. I'm going to keep having a 100% meeting policy. I'm going to fight for them for conservative principles, and not just to vote right, but to create solutions for problems that face Texas. And I will work very hard for the people, for every person in the district, whether they vote for me or not. I'm going to work hard to earn their respect and work hard and listen to them. And as far as endorsing anybody in my House seat, I think I'm going to wait and see who files. And kind of, at this point, believe it or not, no one has announced. I've announced that I'm running, but it's been 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. No one's yet announced, so we'll see what transpires there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dennis?
Good evening, my name is Larry Collins, and I'm going to address my question to Scott Sanford, since you're my senator, and I'm really happy about that. So it's a follow-up, though, on a comment that Pat Fallon made, and it does seem to me that Joe Strauss does seem to be a big problem in the Texas legislature. Although he claims to be a Republican, it's obvious he's not a Republican of our ilk. So my question is, what do we have to do to get a conservative speaker in the House?
No, the speaker is primarily reflective of those who elect him. And so those who are electing him, for the most part, are who they are, and I think that's reflected in leadership in the House. So it's simply this, you've heard this already, is just send more conservative House members to Austin in this next election cycle. It's just numbers. It's just a numbers thing. So the Speaker is elected from amongst the members of the House, and therefore hopefully there'll be a candidate or candidates emerge, and then there will be conservative, plenty of conservative votes, so that the leadership will be reflective of what I think is the true will of Texas.
David, are you going to run again?
Okay, the next question is for all the members on the panel, and you simply yes, no answer.
Good evening, gentlemen. Ann Lever, Prosper Tea Party. My question is very brief, and I hope that will be answered yes or no, but it is going to take just a bit of background here. Tonight, my question concerns something very troubling I learned firsthand after serving for 16 months on a comprehensive planning advisory committee for the town of Prosper. Texas is currently not operating under a representative form of government, regardless of what is perceived by the average citizen, many GOP conservative groups, conservative leaders, and elected officials. We are under regional governments via COGS, councils of government, and MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations comprised of boards and councils of appointees. This system of regional governance is pushing a federal centralized agenda, and dare I say, gentlemen, international policy from the UN, and implementing this policy at the most basic level of government in our Texas cities, towns, and counties. This usurpation of our representative government is happening daily. It is extremely effective in operating completely unencumbered by successfully bypassing the voting citizenry, and I contend even the legislature. Stanley Kurtz for National Review just wrote an article on this, if you'd like to Google it, on how regionalism is allowing the Obama administration to work at breakneck speed against liberty and freedom in this country. So my question for you, and I ask that each of you please weigh in. Are you aware of this usurpation of Texas cities, towns, and counties' sovereignty via regional governance? And two, why is the UN definition and policy of sustainable development quoted verbatim from a UN document called Our Common Future? Why is this language on the North Central Texas Council of Government website, to which taxpayer money flows into that government entity? Why is it on there, and do you see that as problematic?
Thank you, Ann. In this last session, I filed a bill related to NTCOM, and what I felt, and I still feel, is that they don't do a very good job of transparency. They don't do a very good job. They don't. I filed a bill in the last session related to transparency related to NTCOM, which is the North Central Council of Government. It's my opinion, both then and now, that NTCOM doesn't do a good job when it comes to telling people when the public hearings are, what the minutes are, putting all their information online. They don't do any of that. So I filed a bill to stop them from doing one thing in particular, and that's NTCOM also comes into non-disclosure agreements. It goes into NTCOM. They get into a lot of non-disclosure agreements with local municipalities and so forth. And so my bill, what it would do is it would say that they can't get into these hidden agreements with municipalities. So yeah, I do feel as if NTCOM has overstepped its bounds. It's a construct of the federal government. Thank you. Is that better? All right. So NTCOG, I think, what it is basically it's a construct from the federal government, but there are statutes that relate to it here in Texas. So we can ask them to not get into certain agreements. We can ask them to provide more information to individuals. I have seen in a lot of local cities, for lack of a better word, Agenda 21 is really starting to take hold, where they're starting to say, hey, cities are better, or rural areas are better, or these types of roads are better. And it is, I think, pushed down, quite frankly, from other countries. So, again, I filed a bill that I thought would address some of this, and I'd really like to work on those in the next session as well.
And in the interest of time, I'm going to keep my answer a little short. I agree with everything Gio said, but yes, I do agree it's a problem. We need to keep fighting that on.
Do you agree with the UN verbiage on that website?
I haven't seen the verbiage, but what you described, no, I do not agree.
On the verbiage specifically, I don't think it's ever a good idea to quote the UN. And ultimately, if this is going to be a democratic republic, the final say should go to your elected representatives, not to appointees and not to commissions. I mean, the people that you directly. So if you don't like what we're doing, get rid of us and get the people in, not appointees. And I hate those layers. You see it a lot at the city level. I was on the city council where we would form these boards, and then only the board members can elect their executive director, and it's hard to get at that person to change things. And that's ridiculous. Don't add any more layers. Direct representation.
I agree with what was said earlier. I'm concerned about the verbiage. And actually, I filed a bill, constitutional amendment, HJR 105, which would give the legislature oversight over rulemaking authority that bureaucracies have. It's something that I'm very concerned about. Lucino Valla did it, is he takes rulemaking authority and makes up a rule that's got nothing to do with what the Congress intended, and then he shuts down. He depermitted every electric generation facility and every refinery in the state of Texas. The EPA shut down the largest electric generation facility in the state of Texas, a $2 billion asset rendered worthless by EPA bureaucrats. And literally, the lights would have gone off in Texas in 2011 if it wasn't for us getting an injunction against the EPA to keep the lights on in our state. And so trying to rein in a runaway executive, I think the legislature needs more control over what these bureaucrats are doing. And I'm concerned about power going from the people to their elected representatives and then out to a bureaucracy where it's no longer accountable to people. We don't have control over that anymore. And I'm trying to fight to get that. And you can believe it, one of the modern Republican committee chairmen said to me, you know, Van, I just don't know if the legislature is smart enough to have that kind of power. We need to trust the bureaucrats to write the rules. We need to get out there. I said, no way. We need to stand up for the people. That's what we were sent here to do, is to fight for the people of Texas. I'm going to fight for them.
I agree with the concern. When I was mayor in a little bitty city of 500, I did write a resolution to stand up for our 9th and 10th Amendments that are being worked around and served through the COGS and through other things. And it is a mixed issue to me because I'm for freedom. And freedom does entail the right to fail and to enslave yourself. But it is also the duty of the legislature to limit what cities and counties can do. And I think they can require that they be transparent. I think that's a huge issue. And to limit when they can take away someone's property or their rights. That needs to be, I mean, we expect that when we live very close together in a municipality, but to expand that into the counties is a serious mistake. I also authored an HJR, and I think it's, I can't remember, 149, but it was a step short of nullification. It's an issue of non-compliance with unconstitutional federal mandates that would require that any state officers or bureaucrats would not be able to assist or help federal agents. It wouldn't stop the federal agents, but think about it, they only have about 2,000 federal marshals. There's only so much they can do. Part of what they're going to do with the TSA, it's not going to stop at the airport, it's going to go onto your highway, to your football stadium, and it's going to be done with your local law enforcement facilitating it. And I say we do not enter into those agreements, and we actually, through the legislature, which the resolution dealt with, would identify those usurpations of our state sovereignty and require that the state not comply with this unconstitutional action.
Dan, thank you for bringing that. Can you see? Can you hear me? Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And like all the gentlemen, all the representatives here, I too see that as a problem. We had a bill, I think it was HB 14, speaking on the aspect of transparency of local governments, that I've had an opportunity to join author this bill and lay it out before the Appropriations Committee. And this would require all municipalities, cities, to put their debt and their debt service online so that the people could see what was going on. Because transparency, you would think that it would be a term or be a principle that legislators or people would say, yes, we do need transparency, that's our job. But this bill, HB 14, was killed on 2 points of order 2 different times. So this is a problem. And so thank you for bringing that to us.
This is really not about municipality transparency. This is about a system where you join the cog, where you become irrelevant because they hold purse strings. You disagree with them, you don't go along to get along, guess what? There go your transportation dollars. Okay, in my constitutionally protected opinion, this is a scheme. This is a scheme. You join, you go along, or you get spanked. And so it's not the municipalities that are not being transparent, it's having to join up with this cog and having the cog, a regional outside entity, dictate to the citizens of a town or a city. I want to make that clarification. That's very important.
I like what you said, Ann. My constitutionally protected opinion. I love that. These cogs were probably formed with good intentions in mind. Daniel Webster had something to say about good intentions in government. He said this: "It is hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters." Our office is currently working on some legislation that would create a commission that would go and look for regulations that were put forth by agencies that exceed legislative intent. And Ann, I think it just inspired us to throw other entities such as these in with those as well. And once they find those, they would then present those to the legislature for nullification is not the right word. Dissolution. Thank you, sir, for that legal terminology.
I just want to mention one quick thing on this. I want to thank the Tea Party specifically, and people like you, Ann, and Brett, and Wayne, and all of you as activists for bringing an issue like this to our attention as legislators. One of the things the Tea Party does so well is shine light in dark places. And establishment politicians like dark places. Agenda 21, C-scope. These are issues that now are hot button issues that we're working diligently on because of you. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for your work on this. Well, I want to go back to the questions, but thank you again.
Thank you, Gerald. This question is for Scott Turner. My name is Gerald Wiesel. This question is for Scott Turner.
Hey, Gerald.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I read today that the Department of Justice is suing Louisiana over their school voucher program. When can Texas look forward to being sued for theirs?
Thank you, sir. My heart for education, and I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you. Public education, we do have some public schools that do a great job. And we do have public schools in districts, even guys that sit up here have great schools in their particular districts. But public education is not a one-size-fits-all deal. And it is my heart that we concentrate on the students and not on the institution. That our priority has to be to educate and to train students so that they become productive, responsible citizens. And the voucher program, the school choice, the charter schools. And we did have a bill this year that lifted or raised the cap of the number of charter schools that we did. And we also, a school choice amendment came to the floor. And we found out, who's for school choice and who's not. And you would think that here in Texas, being that we have 314,000 kids that are trapped in underperforming school districts, that we would have the opportunity, at least to bring to the floor, the issue of school choice and give the parents an opportunity to take their children to the institution that best fits them. I personally am working on that this interim, and I know my colleagues that are here with me will be helping in that, and that's something I hope that we can bring back to the floor for debate and discussion, and something we can pass to give children an opportunity, parents an opportunity to choose the best institution for their children. But it's always going to be under attack because we concentrate on the institution. We concentrate on having a top-heavy bureaucratic education system. And when you come up against that, you're going to be under attack. But I think that if we can gain momentum and get the proper pieces in place and get the right people as voice pieces and advocates for this, that in the end, thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. It's great to see you all. I'm Bill Eastland. I serve on the State Republican Executive Committee from Senate District 9. And I find myself in an interesting position being on that body because every statewide candidate wants my endorsement. So they're all calling me up and they're asking for it. So here's my reply to everybody. It's generic. If you will tell me that you're going to pick a major area of Texas government that needs conservative reform and craft a good conservative plan to run on so that when you get elected, you got a mandate to put into place, then I will consider endorsing it. But I need to hear something concrete. And it goes all the way down to the legislature, the clerk, both House and Senate members. You all know we need major reform in taxes. One of your colleagues, George Lavender, introduced a bill to eliminate the property tax in Texas. It starts a debate, okay? We couldn't actually get through this time, but it begins a process where perhaps we can do it in the future. When school, Representative Turner has talked about it, we need major initiatives for school choice. We know that transportation, TxDOT is a mess. Another side that's talking about those metropolitan planning organizations is the metropolitan transit authorities. The biggest black hole of government money we've got. And then there's water, and David Simpson talked about that. I would like for you all to talk about major reform that you would run on.
In terms of major reform, one of the things I think you really figure out from your mayor is that there are 150 folks, at least in the House, and all 150 have a different idea of what's the most important thing going on. For myself, back to what I said before, I was really focused on transparency. And that stems for me because when we start thinking about reform, I ran against an incumbent, and so part of the reason is because I still do have a distrust of the government and a distrust of the politicians, notwithstanding the folks here. And so I think it's really important, as part of reform, all of that starts to come from different layers. And so you start looking at special interests, right? I mean, what are the special interests and where's that money going and where is it coming from? Because a lot of the bills that you'll see, and especially the ones that die, are a result of some group, somewhere, with some money wanting it to either pass or not pass. And so I think whenever we start talking about reform, we need a lot more ability to be able to follow money, to be able to see who's pushing what, who's speaking at these public hearings. But I also think that when we get there, we need help, right? If there's a public hearing, for instance, down in Austin, I'll tell you who shows up. The folks at UT Austin. There's a line out the door of folks coming in. And so what we're sensitive to when it comes to reform, because all of those are great things to reform, and all of them would take a monumental task to get in there. But if we want to get right down to the fundamental part of it, I think more analysis, more transparency, where the money is coming.
Briefly, I'll try to answer this question briefly. My sole goal in serving in the legislature and the Texas House of Representatives is to restore and to protect the paramount importance of the Constitution. One of the things that, really the only thing we're required to do in the legislature is pass the state budget, the biennial state budget. That's what we spend the most of our time on. That's what we are in constant hearings and committee meetings and debate over. I mean, that really was the focus, by and large, of the session is the budget. Everything comes back to where the government is spending, not our money, not the government's money, but your money. If I'm going to, Brett, if you're going to give me $10 for dinner, I better go buy dinner instead of go see a movie. You're trusting me to go buy dinner with that. And what the state government struggles with is actually spending your money on things that we say we're going to spend money on. That's one of the reasons I was proud to vote against the biennial budget and pass this session. To go back to another point you made about statewide candidates seeking your endorsement, I want to offer a little piece of advice to you. Look at the records. Look at the records of these candidates running, because there's a lot of people that are going around the state right now claiming to be conservative, and their record is deplorable. Their record is deplorable, and we need to seek out and find and actively support, like you so faithfully do every election year, these statewide candidates. For instance, Ken Paxton. If Ken Paxton is going to win and be our next Attorney General, and it's going to take the people in this room going out and working for him to get him elected, because you know what? We know him the best. He's represented us faithfully for 10 years, and what he said he's going to do is what he's going to do, and what he's done. And we need to go out and the Attorney General race, the Governor's race, and the Agriculture Commissioner race, and the State House District 67 race, find out, seek out true constitutional conservatives who have the records to back it up.
You know, to echo, Gio Capriglione was my desk mate, so I have the best desk mate in the whole house this session. But one of the focuses that I had with running, and still a deep commitment, is to be transparent. When you elect us, that better? And to have an audio system that works better. Transparency is very important, and what they do, again, is this little trick. So as far as reform goes, let me start answering the question by saying, we need people with principles and integrity to win in the first place. That'd be a nice reform. And to understand that government, and have a really acute understanding that government can't give to anyone something that they didn't first take from someone else. You know, when they talk about revenue, and I got very fired up, and Van gave me a kind of a comical bit of support after I did it, but you gotta understand the budget process, like Jeff was saying, okay? We had HB1, the first budget, the first bite of the apple of the budget, I believe it was in April 5th. And I think everybody up here, or most of us, voted for that particular budget. Well, then it goes to the Senate, and they add on a whole bunch of more money, in fact, into the billions, and it became a bad budget. A decent budget became a bad one, and it came back to us about a month later. But I noticed something in HB1, what happened, because we had never been through it before, a lot of the freshmen. And it takes all day long. There's 300 amendments. There's a bunch of garbage that goes on there that they accept, and they say, well, we'll just strip it out later. So we started calling for record votes. We called for 60, 70 record votes to get them on the record, number one. And then after the budget was passed, fast forward through about 13 hours, they thanked the legislative budget. They thanked the chairman of appropriations. They thanked by name all of these sub-chairmen. They thanked the Appropriations Committee. They marched out the entire legislative budget board, about 60, 80 people, and they thanked them. We gave a standing ovation. They never thanked the person that flipped the whole bill, the Texas tax bill. So I was a little freshman, you know, I haven't done a lot of these public events. You don't usually get nervous publicly speaking, but quite honestly, when you're talking about 150 colleagues and the people in the gallery and you're new there, when that bill came back, I swore that I was going to get up there and give a 2-minute speech to thank the Texas taxpayer. And I did that. Man, I'll tell you what, not usually being nervous, my heart was beating, I was shaking in my shoes, but I went up there and did just that. So, you know, thank you. You've got to realize what you work for. Transparency is vitally important. Gio had a great bill, and he put it in front of State Affairs. He laid the bill out. They belittled him, members of our own party, and it was an assault. It was ridiculous. It was like one of those worst things you'd see in D.C. And he stood his ground because it was a good bill. It was about, you need to know if we have contracts with local governments. You have every right to know that. You should know that. Well, some of those people do, and they don't want you to know. You know, and then a bill, I think it was 435 I joint authored, to say, look, if you want to be a lobbyist after you serve in the legislature, you got to take a 2-year or off period. Because I think this session, 14 of them were state representatives on January 8th, and they were lobbyists on January 9th. And a lot of those same people used your money to send us what seemed like at first innocuous notes of support saying, hey, if you ever need anything, you let me know. On state letterhead with state money that they mailed it to us. And those people became lobbyists. How convenient. So transparency is very important for reform. And zero-based budgeting.
Well, that's a good question. I'll sort of open the door a little bit. It's something that I got done this last legislative session I was very particularly proud of. It was requiring any bill that increases taxes, fees, or assessments, or bonding authority has to say so in the very first line of the bill. And there were a lot of people that, you know, after they voted for it said, oh my God, what have I done? Because the bills that they had filed need to be refiled. A lot of people wouldn't even file. They said, forget it. I'm not going to file this tax bill. I'm not going to file this bill. I can't hide it in page 16. But the people that were the most furious about it were the lobbyists. The lobbyists went and had a 1-hour pitch session with the parliamentarian whining and complaining about how horrible it was that Van Taylor had gotten up and gotten this rule through. But a little bit after that, Grover Norquist from Emergency Tax Reform called me up in my office in Austin, which you've never done before. And he said, I heard that you got this rule through, and I explained it to him. And he said, that is awesome. There are 49 other states that need to be just like Texas. I was proud to get that reform through. There are other reforms I want to get through. The bill that Pat Fallon started earlier about taking pensions away from corrupt politicians. I filed that 2 sessions in a row. Now, Gio is a hero in my book because he beat the committee chairwoman who refused to hear that bill. Even when I said, look, just make it first-degree felonies. And she said, no, I'm still not going to hear it. I'm like, capital murder. She's like, no. So this session, I got to hear it. But when I get to the Senate, I'm going to file it. And I know I'm going to get one of these guys to file it for me. We're trying to get that done. I have a bill to verify the citizenship of every voter in this state that has no. It doesn't cost anything. Because we've got a computer at Department of Public Safety that has a citizenship of every person who's got a driver's license in the state of Texas. And we have a computer at the Secretary of State with every voter in the state. And they talk to each other every day. They just don't talk about citizenship. So it literally is just one law, one line of code change, and we can verify the citizenship of every single voter in the state, and it wouldn't cost us anything. And another thing I want to do is I want to get rid of red tape around water permits. That's a whole other discussion. But anyway, there's a lot to do in state government, and these guys are up here to get it done, so be proud of them.
Dennis, we need people to address one question to one person. Now, let me take Pat Fallon's suggestion. Representative Fallon.
Sir. Representative. You serve on the Human Services and Technologies Committee, is that true? Yes, sir. Have you accepted donations from PACs that represent issues that come before this committee. Let me give you some examples. PACs that represent the Department of Aging and Disability Services, PACs that represent mental health and mental retardation services, PACs that represent Texas Workforce Commission and local workforce development boards, PACs that represent group home facilities, PACs that represent housing and health services, PACs that represent interest. Do you understand why we can't get anything done as an individual? PACs that represent children's advocacy or their counterparts, PACs or individuals that sit on a board or an IT company that are employed by an IT company. Anyone associated with technology industry who has testified before the technology committee in favor of or opposed to a bill before your committee, sir.
Chuck, great question. Long question, short answer, no. Fortunately, I'm a really bad fundraiser.
Dan Taylor, have you accepted donations from any companies that relate to any committees that you sit on?
You know, I have worked very hard in my time in the legislature to make sure that you don't have any questions about who I work for. I take my salary, I give it to charity. Okay? I don't let lobbyists buy me a meal. I won't let them buy me a sporting ticket. I don't take state-funded health care. I won't take free license plate from the state of Texas. I don't take free parking from the DFW airport, or Field, or the city of Austin. I don't want you to ever doubt who I work for, and I don't want to ever forget that I work for you. And that's why my cell phone is on my file. That's why I encourage you to call me. People give money to the Manitoba campaign because they believe in my cause, not because I believe in theirs. And that's how I look at campaign contributions. But as far as what I have done as a legislator, I don't know of anybody else that does what I do and how I approach serving in this office. But I don't want you to ever forget that I work for you.
Dennis, who is our next question from?
I noticed Chuck Brook is on the roll. One question. Anyway, Ricky from the McKinney Tea Party. And we know that there's a lot of issues in Texas and they're very important, but most of the Tea Party gets most upset with what's going on in Congress, what's going on with our out-of-control president. And an idea recently surfaced that I want to ask you all about was Mark Levin's just written a book about the having a Constitution convention, having a states convention. It's part of the Constitution, Article 5, where they can have a Constitution to consider amendments to take back control for the states and put this federal government back in the box, which they're out of. So my question is this. Number one, have you heard of this? Do you support it? And my second point is, I think the perfect person to lead the state effort would be Rick Terri. I don't think he's going to make it as president. He's done as far as that's concerned, but it'd be a perfect thing for him to lead amongst the states. Would you encourage him to do so? Who is that question for? Okay, we'll address the advance since he's probably going to be our next secretary.
Rick, thank you for asking that. The answer, as I've gone around Senate District 8, I've definitely had people come to me and talk to me about that. On one hand, with great hope, I would hope we'd be able to really take the federal government and put it back in the box that it started in. It's upsetting to me how much power the federal government has been able to take over. Unfortunately, that power has been taken with the assent of the people, not the people in this room, but the people in this country. And so I think there aren't enough Republican states to do what it is that Mark Levin is hoping to do. I wish that was the case. I wish that we were in a position as a country to start putting the federal government back in the box. And all I can do and all you can do is wake up every morning, fight for the fight for the cause. Right now, for me, it's fighting to be your senator on the Senate District 8. And I think we've got to follow.
As far as 34 states, there's 33 Republican legislative control states. We only need one.
Well, there are a lot of things to focus on. If we can get there, I'm for it. Count me skeptical that we'll get there. I'm sorry not to be an optimist.
Yes?
Well, real quick question either to Dave or Scott. My name is Derek Baker. I've heard it stated frequently the last several months that we didn't fund our priorities for this session, education, transportation, water. I believe those are. If not, tell us. How do
we talked a lot about it in this last session, but we didn't do a whole lot. And that is we need to use dedicated funds for the purpose for which they're dedicated. We still have about 4.2 billion. If they didn't change it, I heard they would change it. Let's see. We've had as much as $5 billion. Y'all probably heard me talk about the volunteer firefighters funds. Probably easiest to understand. We tax $30 million a year. This biennium, we're only using $13.5 million of that $30 million. Balance of that goes to fund other programs. So I'm not opposed actually to dedicated funds under certain circumstances because it can actually limit government. If we're not going to use it all for volunteer firefighter assistance and their equipment, we can just reduce the amount that we tax people for their farms and ranches and equipment. Now, that's one way. The other thing, it needs to be in the base budget. Transportation shouldn't have been left to the special sessions. Same thing with things like pro-life bills, but those got killed in committee. The zero-based budgeting would be a huge start. We could probably find the money that we need for our roads right in TxDOT if we implemented that.
Yes.
Next question, please.
Hi, gentlemen. My name's Danny Bernal, and I'm an avid outdoorsman, as many of my neighbors and friends are. And we are worried about our Second Amendment rights. Now, there was several good bills that came through the House, and many of them didn't even make it to be discussed. So I was just kind of curious what we can do to make that happen for the next session, so that the federal government cannot come out and try to stop out our Second Amendment right. I directed to Scott Sanford, who is my representative.
Thanks, Danny. I think the answer to that question is very similar to the answer to that I would give for the question about the budgeting priorities. It's that you've got to have the will in the leadership of that committee to let those bills out of committee. In the budget situation, it's the will to live within your means in the leadership of that committee. And I'll just add on to that the chairman of Appropriations Committee just recently announced his retirement, and so perhaps we can actually budget our priorities in the next session. But as far as the Second Amendment issues are concerned, we had a Second Amendment day. It was a Saturday, and they were weak bills for the most part because the good ones just got stuck in committee. And so it's just simply more. The answer goes back to so many of the other questions. We have more conservative representatives from the state. We have more conservative representation on the committees as far as leadership is concerned. We'll see more conservative bills come out to the floor for debate and passage.
Scott Turner, there were 12 Democrats in the Senate. They were pretty effective as a result. Next question.
This question to Representative Sanford. This is my representative. I'm proud of that. I have a question regarding private property and the obvious local water. Because we've been reading the news, such as Bloomberg Business Group reported that many sources of water in Texas are privately owned. I'd just like to hear your opinion on that and how do you weigh private property rights and the obvious local water.
Let me narrow that down just a little bit. So the question is, how do you balance
the private property rights of individual owners who own water supplies and the obvious need for the state of Texas to have access to supply water?
I'll be honest with you, we had not researched that over this last session at all. But both are paramount issues, and you've got to protect. I'd fundamentally lean toward protecting the rights of the property owner. And so if land has to be taken by eminent domain, let's say for the construction of a reservoir, then you just have to make certain that adequate compensation based upon market values is given to those who claim the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I follow that up?
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with that. The problem is that if you own the most important part of the reservoir, it's the least presently valuable property because it's only good for hunting feral hogs. And but what we need to do is think about private property being a receptacle and to pay them as the highest and best use of that property to collect a very valuable commodity. When we let the free market work with respect to oil and gas, it has worked even with a depleting asset. This is a replenishing asset. I do think freedom and private property is the best way to allocate that and will bring people. There'll be people who will give up their trees, their ranches, whatever, to send you water from East Texas if they knew that they and their children and their grandchildren could receive some remuneration for the use of that ongoing that property which they had expected to be used by their family before the state came and took it. I worked on that. I was almost ready to file a bill. Someone else had done it before me and failed. And I wanted to work on it during the end. I do think it's a very important item.
There is in the prosperity part. I want to follow up on that appropriate timing of my question, but it's with regard to Cisco and Common Core, which now I understand because people are onto that they're going to change the name. But from what I understood, the state of Texas said no. So I'd like to know from the legislative standpoint, is Common Core C-scope, which is pushed by Jeb Bush, Microsoft Bill Gates, is it null and void in this state? Because I'm hearing from people in some schools that the teaching of Islam is going on and it's not the teaching of what our history really says. Also mathematics, changing what the actual answers are. Things that are not based upon facts are being thrown out the window. So I'd like to know from anyone who knows Common Core, C-scope, what is the status in Texas? Has it been thrown out, or is it still viable and living? Because I also understand that Race to the Top gave money to the states, and with those tentacles, put in place Common Core. So can you please tell me what is the status?
Can you answer that for us? Sure. For those who aren't familiar, there's two different standards. There's Common Core, which is really part of Barack Obama's administration to go and provide a national standard, if you will, a national curriculum. And then there's C-scope, and that's related to a curriculum that was developed by regional education service centers in order to reduce costs. Now, Common Core, what we did vote for was to say that we're not going to allow the Common Core curriculum in Texas, and so we won't. But C-scope, what we said is we want that curriculum before it's used, or any curriculum, similar to C-scope, before it's used, has to be approved by your elected officials, primarily and specifically the SBOE. However, after session ends, of course, we do the laws, we know what our intent is, but it seems like at least one SBOE member said, just because the legislature said it has to be reviewed, doesn't mean you can't just download it and share it and use it inside of your schools. And so what we've seen is that there's still schools out there who believe and probably will continue to use C-scope. I don't know if you've been, there's a website called Texas Tribune, and if you go to Texas Tribune, I was doing this actually last week. It was, my kids were just about to start school, Monday a lot of them started, so they have the whole entire C-scope curriculum online, it's 1,600 lesson plans. And they have a neat little search engine. So I'm like, all right, what don't I want to be in there? Right? So I typed in abortion, and I typed in search. Sure enough, part of the curriculum includes a discussion on counseling, pre and post-abortion counseling. I went and I did look up Mecca, and they have a map, and they said, and you know, some of it makes sense. Okay, on this map, draw where the Chinese Wall is, draw where the Statue of Liberty is, draw the trek to Mecca. And so you say, why would we put that there? Why would we have some of this stuff inside of it? So what we're trying to do, or what we tried to do, is kill it dead. And part of what happened is it was a nonprofit effectively that was created to go and develop this. And then it had an intellectual property agreement with the schools. So the schools would license it and pay back for that. And what we said is, hey, listen, you're going to review that and do all that. But it went out in the public domain, i.e. the internet, and there's schools that are going to keep using it. There's schools. In fact, there was a school, Plano ISD, where some individuals had tried to sue to stop Cisco from being used, and that lawsuit was thrown out of court 2 weeks ago. There's a really good debate between Dan Patrick, who's running for Lieutenant Governor, and also with Thomas Ratliff, the SBOE member, where they go back and forth. This was on last Friday or last Saturday. Saturday. And it was a pretty good back and forth. So when it shows up on YouTube, you'll learn a lot about what Cisco is and what it shouldn't be.
We were at that debate.
Took place down in Tyler. Senator Patrick was there. Thomas Ratcliffe was there. Thomas Ratcliffe is a one-man construction team employed by Microsoft. He is a full-time lobbyist for Microsoft. Also is on the State Board of Education. He is the one that is pushing the fact that it's public domain. And Senator Patrick is taking him on. There are a great number of schools across Texas and in your local areas that are using Cisco. There are some 1,300 other possibilities that are available. Ratcliffe is pushing Cisco for a particular reason. And it's not as far separated from Common Core as you think. We have time for one more question. Gentleman from Mike. You are?
Ron Woodruff with the McKinney Tea Party. Quickly, my question is about lobbying. From a distance, we have probably a shallow, superficial impression of what lobbying is, maybe negative. I wonder, going to Austin for your first term, and Scott, I'll direct this to you, Scott Turner, since you haven't spoken for a while. Going to Austin for your first term, was lobbying as an industry what you expected it to be? To what extent is it dangerous? To what extent is it possibly even across the line? And is something that you can about?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, to answer, was it what I expected it to be? Yes, sir. And I think that, the lobby is what it is. There are a few lobbyists who are in Austin in particular that are good lobbyists. You can trust them, they're honest. And just like every other profession, there's some that you can't. But one thing about the lobby that I made a decision before I went down there is, it's up to me as a legislator to draw a line in how far I let the lobby in, what I do with the lobby, what influence I allow the lobby to be. Sometimes the lobby can have great information about bills, policy, this, that, and the other. And in my estimation, the lobby can be as dangerous as you let it. It's up to you. Your influence, I say this personally, I'm not going to say this for my colleagues as well. We cannot be influenced by the lobby because we have conviction. And the lobby should not be able to sway you or woo you by what they can give you or by what they can offer you. All of us that are sitting at this table are businessmen, pastors, people that have been successful in life before we went to the legislature. And we didn't go there to hang out or to party or to be liked by the lobby. And I know I can say that for myself personally very strongly. So to answer your question and wrap up my remarks, the lobby can be as dangerous as you allow them to be, but they can be an asset as far as information. And that's what I like to, I don't want to say use, but that's the relationship I have with them for information purposes. But there are some good lobbyists. And the myth out there is that all the lobby is bad. It's just like all lawyers are bad. Well, Jeff Leach is a wonderful lawyer. And he's a great citizen, and he's a wonderful father, and businessman, he's a great legislator, and he's a lawyer. You know, and so a lot of people say,
He is the exception.
he's the exception. You know, a lot of people say that all professional athletes are bad. Well, that's not true either, so it's the same for the lobby. But point being, you can control your relationship with the lobby. I'll leave it at that.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time here, but I would like to ask Pat Fallon, have you got something you can share with us about the state legislature?
I just wanted to share one quick story that, you know, you're down there for what we thought was going to be 5 months and ended up being 7.5. And a lot of things, you sometimes in one breath you'll see something incredibly noble happen. And then next you'll see something very absurd, very disheartening and almost menacing. But what I want to share with you, one of the funnier things that I saw and was a part of, there's a state rep named Lon Burnham. And Lon is described, probably self-described himself, as about 3 ticks left of Trotsky. He's a lefty of the old-fashioned kind of ilk. But anyhow, he had a bill that he wanted to, now get this, it was a bill that he considered a local bill. He did not talk to the mayor of Fort Worth. He did not talk to other state reps in Terri County, that's where he's from, that this would have affected. So he didn't really follow the protocol to begin with. But what he wanted to do was rename the Purple Heart Expressway. And by the way, he did not rename, in my own opinion, the Purple Heart Expressway. It's a pretty darn good name. He wanted to rename it in his section of Terri, in this section of Terri County, the Cesar Chavez. Now, Lon Burnham is one of only about 7 white Democrats left in the state of Texas in the House. And he was obviously pandering to his increasingly changing demographic, thinking that he would do this and they would vote for him. Well, several of us up here in the House had a problem with that. For a lot of different reasons. My personal one was, you know, Nino Aquino is a personal political hero of mine who was jailed by the Marcos regime. Cesar Chavez went to the Philippines in 1977 to praise Marcos and his regime, while Nino Aquino was in prison for years, and that regime killed him 6 years later, assassinated him. I don't want that renamed Cesar Chavez Highway, and neither do a lot of the Terri County reps. So there was a big scrum on the House floor, where on one side you had a lot of the liberal Democratic Hispanic reps, who to them, in their worldview, is Cesar Chavez is kind of like Martin Luther King. I don't see it that way, I think many of you would. So Gio, Jonathan Stickland, and some of the other Terri County reps were right in the thick of it. And we were arguing back and forth, and I said, you know Nino Aquino? No, I don't, you know, and so we were trying to, so a scrum developed, and it got a bit contentious. So I thought I had a good idea. And I have to explain to you who Jonathan Stickland is if you do not know. He is the youngest member of the Republican delegation. He is 29 years old. He is a principal firebrand. And he would say he's big boned. He's a big man, big presence, great guy. So Stickland's in there, and I thought, I got a really good idea. And I grabbed Gio. I said, Gio, you know what we should do? If they're sitting there saying that this is racist and all this other garbage, why don't we rename that portion after a Medal of Honor recipient that happened to be Hispanic? Ha-ha! And Gio goes, yeah, that's good. Stickland's got a way better idea. And I look over at Stickland, and he had gotten an amendment drafted on the House floor, actually had a staff do this, and he's holding it in his hand, and he's arguing with the local Democrats. And I said, yeah, what is it? He says, Stickland's got an amendment that's going to rename it the Jesus Christ Highway. So I run up to Stick, and I say, Stick, do you really got an amendment that's going to rename it the Jesus Christ Highway? And he smiles, just a 10,000 watt smile. He says, oh yeah, Pat, you know why? He said, why? He says, because in Texas, even liberals are afraid to vote against Jesus. That was my best day in the legislature.
I can share with you a story about Pat Fallon. There were several of us down there wearing suits and doing our lobbyist thing. There was this gentleman walking down the hall. We recognized him from the back. His name was Pat Fallon. And we needed to talk to Pat before he got to the floor. So we kind of tried to yell at Pat, not too loud. He kind of turned around and looked over his shoulder and saw a couple of suits coming his way. This is what he thinks of lobbyists. He saw a couple of suits, figured they were lobbyists, and he took off running. turned around and looked and saw it was us, he stopped and said that. So, we talked about that often. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time. What we have is that.